We're joined now by Luke Pollard, the Armed Forces Minister. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us, Minister.
Good morning.
Talk to me about where you stand this morning as to whether the United Kingdom, it's not so much can trust the President of the United States, but can rely on him at a time of need.
Well, the US is our most important, significant and closest security ally. We cooperate with them deeply on defence, intelligence and security matters every single day. What we have at the moment, I think, is a position where both the US President, the Prime Minister and President Macron all agree that we need to move towards a plan that delivers a durable and lasting peace in Ukraine. The only way that can happen is for European nations to step up our support for Ukraine and to create a situation where we can have a security guarantees for Ukraine backed by the United States that will prevent Russia from ever invading again. Because the very real worry that I think the Ukrainians have, that President Zelenskyy explained at the weekend, is any short pause in the war simply allows the Russians time to rearm, regroup and re-invade. Now, that is not acceptable. That doesn't deliver the lasting peace that we need. And that's why we need to work closely with our European and our US allies. And that's precisely why you saw the Prime Minister have such important, deep diplomatic conversations over the past week with all of them.
It's interesting to hear you strike that tone. I'm kind of getting a sense of pragmatism. It feels like that was one of the key tones that came out of an extraordinary week for international affairs from the Prime Minister's approach to it last week, was trying to be pragmatic. With that in mind, do you think that the relationship between President Zelenskyy and President Trump can be repaired? Or in the interests of being pragmatic, in the interests of getting where everyone wants to get to, should he consider stepping aside in order to allow a pragmatic deal to be struck between the US and Ukraine?
I mean, the events last week in the Oval Office were uncomfortable and no one wants to see that. But we also know that the only way to create that lasting peace is with US involvement, with the continuing military support to our friends in Ukraine, because we're talking a lot about what the peace looks like, but we shouldn't forget that the war is continuing today. You know, there are Russian glide bombs landing on the front line, killing people. There are Russian cruise missiles and drone attacks on Ukrainian critical national infrastructure happening today. So as well as making sure that we can bring our allies together to create a plan for a durable, lasting peace, Europe and the US are essential in delivering that. We've got to step up our military support to keep Ukraine in the fight tonight. And that's really important. That's the reason why over the weekend the government announced a £1.6 billion missile contract with missiles being made in Northern Ireland, creating 200 jobs there, more in the supply chain, that will provide Ukraine with the ability to shoot down those Russian cruise missiles attacking their infrastructure. We've got to keep Ukraine in the fight, provide a plan for a lasting peace, and then a plan for the security guarantees, which the Prime Minister has said could include and will include UK forces on the ground, in the air, in the sea, around Ukraine, to make sure that we can create that lasting peace in Ukraine. But that requires US and European nations to be involved as well.
Do you think the US will back that whilst President Zelenskyy remains in power?
Well, it's clear that the meeting last week was very uncomfortable, but it's for the Ukrainians to choose who their leaders are. President Zelenskyy is a democratically elected leader. He's been clear that he sees his role as bringing lasting peace to Ukraine. And he's been clear over the weekend as well that he's prepared to take steps himself with his position if it helps secure a lasting peace for Ukraine. But it's for the Ukrainians to decide on what terms that peace is conducted, what, how, and to what extent that plan works. But we need to do our bit. And that's why over the weekend and all throughout last week, you've seen incredible leadership from the United Kingdom, from the Prime Minister in particular, having these really difficult conversations with our allies. And sometimes when you're speaking to your friends, the conversations that are tougher are even harder. But we're having those deep diplomatic conversations to understand how we can give more military support today, how we can create that lasting peace tomorrow.
I just wanted to pick up, though, on that point. You know, you made that clear, the Ukrainian people get to choose their leader. In an interview just before he took off last night, Yalda Hakim for Sky News was asking President Zelenskyy about that, and he made clear again his price for stepping aside would be NATO membership. Again, I come back to this term pragmatism. Is that realistically off the table for Ukraine at this stage?
Well, the United Kingdom believes that Ukraine is on an irreversible path to NATO membership. It's clearly not going to join the alliance tomorrow, but we believe that their rightful place is within the NATO alliance. But to get there, we have to create this peace. And I think it's worth just stressing that this is really difficult and hard, but this is why these conversations are taking place, why the Prime Minister convened European leaders and the Prime Minister of Canada in London at the weekend, why he welcomed President Zelenskyy last week, why he travelled to the US last week to try and get agreement on what a plan looks like. That's what UK leadership, along with our French friends, are delivering at the moment. But we should be in no doubt that there'll be lots of twists and turns and opportunities for people to speculate about what a deal would look like. It's not my job to be able to offer speculation on what the terms of any agreement should be or what any security guarantees look like, because if I do that, the only person that would benefit would be your viewer in the Kremlin, President Putin, and we don't want to give him any advantage in any negotiations to understand what the security guarantees look like. But I can tell you that we're working closely with our European and US friends to create a plan that would be lasting, because I don't want a short pause that allows Ukraine to be reinvaded in a month or a few months' time by Russia again. We need a lasting peace. To do that, more military equipment now, a clear plan for a negotiated settlement, and a lasting peace backed by European and US security guarantees.
Minister, I just wanted to read you something that Peter Mandelson said yesterday, your ambassador to the US. Europeans, too, need to back the calls for a ceasefire. And by the way, I think that Ukraine should be the first to commit to a ceasefire and defy the Russians to follow. That is UK government policy now?
No, it's certainly right that the Ukrainians want peace. I think of all the people on our continent that want peace, the Ukrainians want it the most. But we're still in discussions, diplomatic engagement with our European, US and Ukrainian friends as to the shape of that deal. But it's certainly right that the war could stop tomorrow if President Putin stopped his illegal and unprovoked aggression. He could stop this war. So what we need to find is a formula that allows a peace that is lasting and durable to be created and then to be defended, because we need to defend this peace. Just as NATO has defended peace in Europe since the Second World War, we will need to find a way of defending that peace in Ukraine as well.
So Peter Mandelson misspoke yesterday?
That's not government policy, and you wouldn't expect me to commentate on every ups and down in the negotiations. But we are seeking to find that lasting peace. But it's certainly true that the Ukrainians want peace in their country.
Let's just quickly touch one final point. You know, the Prime Minister said that Europe must do the heavy lifting. President Macron yesterday spoke about getting to 3 to 3.5% of GDP for defence spending. A crazy week last week. You pledged to get to 2.5 by 2027. Do you think you now have to discuss bringing forward when you reach 3% as well? Is that something to be discussed in the next 6 months?
Well, the decision to increase defence spending to 2.5% by April 2027 will provide the Ministry of Defence with £13 billion extra in 2 years' time to provide on defence. We have a commitment to 3% in the next Parliament, but it's just as important we look at what we are spending that money on, because frankly, we've inherited an armed forces that's been hollowed out and underfunded. We've got a retention and recruitment crisis we've inherited from the last administration. So we have to take steps to spend that money wisely, to renew the contract between the nation and those men and women who serve in our armed forces. We've taken steps to do so with the biggest pay rise in 20 years for our armed forces. And when the Strategic Defence Review, which is a document that will set out what the shape and structure of our forces will be, is published in the spring, you'll see how we intend to spend that money and spend it more wisely. But it's certainly true that European nations need to do more to step up their own military spending, but also need to step up their military support to Ukraine. The UK is doing that, and many of our European nations are doing, European friends are doing so, but there is more to do for all of us.
Luke Pollard, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.